Are you the type of person that just says yes to everything? Well, today we're going to introduce you to a new word, no. Hey, welcome back to Blunt Force Business. I'm Brian LaFauci.
And I'm Patrick Marino.
And today we're going to talk to you about the benefit of the word no. Because no means no in the business world. Only. Restart. Restart.
Were we actually restarting? We're just talking?
No, we're not actually restarting. We're just going to get fired. You're going to fire me when it's over. The reality is this was a great topic that you actually came up with, and I was psyched when I read it, when I saw what you'd put down, because I feel this plagues especially startups.
Right.
And it does so because, when you enter the startup world, or even if you're like really focused on growth, like I really want to grow this thing.
Early stage.
Yeah, every idea seems like a good idea, right? Because you're afraid. There's a little bit of fear. So you're afraid that, maybe we're not going to make enough revenue, or am I going to be able to support myself with this new venture? And you end up in this perpetual cycle of yes to everything that comes your way.
I think it can be something that hurts you as an individual too. Just working for a company when somebody just, you want to impress and you want to be a good soldier. So you end up taking on everything. And I know I've had a ton of examples of that. People working with the different companies and ventures I've been in where they just want to impress and they want to be a part of it.
Right.
But in reality, they don't really have the time to do it. And it ends up kind of being ridiculous. Like it's ends up being a negative because it's like you look back and like, what has he really followed through on?
You can always picture that, bringing this into more of a corporate setting. I can always picture that individual that I worked with that whenever the boss said, "Hey, we got, we're looking for a volunteer," and they would be like the first, fucking happy raise hand over here.
Well, a lot of times they would just volunteer to do it before there was even a thing. Like just like, oh, I want to get involved in that.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Right.
It's like there's only so many things you can do.
Let's start a committee.
And I'm going through personal note.
Yeah.
In my life, I'm definitely like in my midlife crisis stage. I am living the movie Yes Man. Not quite, but I mean, you know what I mean? Where it's like people just ask me to do stuff and ask me what I think about that. And I've been saying yes to a lot of things just because I feel like I'm on the back nine. I'm single. And I might not be single for much longer. I mean, I'm not involved with anybody, but I mean, I'm not, like there's a period now, like there's this little period of undisclosed amount of time, right? Yeah. Who knows how long it's going to be. So I'm just going to say yes to as many things as I possibly can. But it comes back to bite me too, like not in like bad ways, but like in ways where I'm just exhausted. I shouldn't have done that. Like why did I do that? You know what I mean? Like I haven't had it really bite me in the ass too hard in like a really negative way, but like it's like a time consuming. Like I really shouldn't have done that. Like I didn't have time to do it. Why did I say yes to that? That kind of stuff.
Well, you outlined it as fear.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's whatever the fear is. Fear of not getting the promotion. Fear of my startup doesn't make it. Fear of I'm not going to have this opportunity again. Fear, whatever. Fear drives yes. And the point of I think our video today is, to our listeners out there, is helping them deal with that.
Yeah.
And assess it and be more effective with managing it.
Yeah, it's a conversation. It's a decision. It's not just a automatic like, yeah, we can do it. Let's get into it.
Which leads us to blunt force fact number 1.
What's blunt force fact number 1?
It is there is no such thing as a free yes. Thought I was going to say lunch, but I didn't. I said yes. No such thing as a free yes. So when evaluating these opportunities that are coming your way, even if you're in these dire situations, or even if step number 1, identify that you're making fear-based decisions almost all the time in life.
Right.
Even when you don't classify them as fear-based decisions, there's always a small component that is lurking in the back. I'm sure you just told a great story of how that's sitting with you. I can say the same thing where I'll always look at my company invoices and balance sheet, right? And especially, I do this all the time when I look at my projected invoices. So I'll look and see, all right, we've booked out X amount of work for the next couple months, and I'll be happy with that. But then what's the fear response that always happens? Well, the fear response is, well, that's only really through March. So what does that mean for me for, and so what does that lead to? Well, maybe that leads to me approaching that next call with the client as like, I'm just going to say yes, because that'll check a box in that, future revenue category, which is the fear, right? Without thinking through that yes there's a cost to that yes. And the cost can be a bunch of things.
Right. Or it's a cost of mostly I think it's time. We'll talk about that in blunt force fact number 3 too. But I mean, like, to me, it's a lot of times you see the dollar figures or the prestige of the opportunity.
That's a great. I'm really glad you brought that up.
Those are the two things for me. I know the dollar figure is the one in particular for me that has hit me in the past, when it's just like, oh, here's like a decent chunk of change, and all you see is that. Mm-hmm. You don't see the hours that it's going to take and how it's going to disrupt the rest of you just see the money. Right. And you don't recognize the fact that there's going to be these consequences down the line. And there's nothing that you can take on where there would be no consequences. Right. There's always going to be some trade-off. Right. Yeah. And, the good companies will project. Right. And they'll say, project, I know I'm going to get X amount of work, which is hard, as you would say, in a startup or in a early company. Mm-hmm. It's hard to project out. So it's like, what can we take on? What can't we take on? So we take on more than we can chew. And the prestige part is like, I worked in a company that had the opportunity to work with like one of the major Boston-based projects, and we didn't have the ability to do it. But we pitched it, and we got it.
You win.
Yeah, exactly. We got it, and then it's like you had to figure it out how to do it afterwards. Right. And I think it ended up working out for that company, but like the company doesn't exist anymore because they just did that too often. Right? It's like we're just going to commit to stuff. Yeah. And then who knows? Right. If it's going to work out. Yeah. And there's no such thing as free. There's always that consequence. You're not just going to get the money. It's not just, here you go. You have to actually do the job, do the work. And then hopefully it turns out okay. But you also have all the other things that your company's doing too.
I think as part of whenever evaluating new business, or like you said, or maybe a new job or additional duty at your job, if that's what you're doing, it's always a matter of taking that minute to just do the exercise of writing down, what's the cost to this? Because something is going to give. That give could be a million different things. It doesn't, it might not always be, the give might be actual money, because if I'm doing this, there's only so much time in the day. So if I'm doing this and I'm going to get X out of it, something else isn't going to fill that time. Something else that might also be a revenue stream isn't going to fill that time. So what are the costs that you need to start thinking of? The costs that you think of are, monetary costs, time costs, quality of life costs, like overall well-being costs, right? Like if I take that on, now I'm giving up my time at the gym.
Or I'm giving up my time with my kids, or I'm giving up my time of sleeping.
Yeah, absolutely.
And at the time it sounds good because it's money, but then at the end of the day, was the extra boost in income worth the squeeze of me just completely falling to pieces? Right. Because we're going to talk about this in blunt force fact number 3. I overextended myself. You know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah.
And I have that happen, before we jump to blunt force fact number 2, just kind of wrap this, I'll personally relate to this, that one of the things that I did in my life is I'll get up really early and I block off like a couple hours before anyone else is up to just do work. That's programmed on my calendar. So when I wake up and I get my computer, I just open my calendar and it's in there what I'm supposed to be working on. Like I plan it out the end of the week before. I just get up, open it. Okay, that's what I'm working on this morning during this time block. But the interesting thing about that, when you talk about quality, and cost, is that has become that yes, that I'm going to do that has become built into now how I take on additional stuff, because in my mind I have that time frame. So what that means is now that is just part of my workday. Whereas maybe when it started, it was this additional thing to kind of get caught up. Now it's just part of it. And that's how people get to the 16-hour day before they know it. And they're like, how the fuck did I get here?
Right.
Right? Because you do something that then becomes a thing you do because, well, I got to do, but then you build on that. So you keep saying yes because you now accomplish the bandwidth of, I accomplished everything with that. So now I have, I think, more bandwidth, but I'm building on this time I already sacrificed.
There are ways to manage this. One of them would be to make hires, right? Hire people. Another one could be the subcontract, right? A lot of companies will be like, we're going to take this on, so it's going to be under our name, but somebody else is going to do it.
Yep.
And we'll just, we'll manage it. So there are definitely ways to deal with this. Otherwise, no one would ever scale ever. You have to say yes to some
absolutely.
things, but you just have to realize that there's no such thing as the free.
Well, the process
There's always a cost, right? And that doesn't mean you can't manage the cost. It just means that you have to recognize the cost.
And the process that we use in our weekly business growth calls that we do with our clients all the time, where we do the stop, start, continue, or the MEPS reflection, that process is the process where this can get evaluated.
Yep.
And I love that when we do that. Like, all right, what's good? What do I want to start? What do I want to stop? And not the key one being that. Like, what do I need to stop doing that I didn't maybe evaluate well when I took it on, and now I'm going to dump it? It's people who don't go through that process on a regular basis that get stuck in the OODA loop of suck.
Yep.
Yeah, the suck OODA loop, the Sakuda loop.
It's a new thing, I guess.
Come over to Christmas with your Sakuda loop.
The suck OODA loop?
It's got prosciutto.
The suck OODA loop has prosciutto on it? The suck OODA loop sounds like it's good.
Sakuda loop board.
Oh.
Yeah. We're creating new words here. Anyways, all right. Blunt force fact number 1, there's no such thing as a free yes. Evaluate. So evaluate the cost of your yes before you say it. Blunt force fact number 2 is a key for us here. Remember your why. So whenever you're engaging in taking on something new, how does it revert back to your why? What's really important? Or out of fear, are you now going down a rabbit hole of something that isn't? Go ahead. You've done it. I've done it. We've all done this.
Yeah, because it's the same reason that we talked about before. It's usually money. Mm-hmm. It's like 90% of the time money, or it's prestige. It's the opportunity to work with somebody else you might have not have had the opportunity to do. But like if you're building a brand or you're building a company that's going to be sustainable in the long term, you can't just jump at every opportunity to take on something, because that might make your company like there's value in having a really strongly well-defined niche where it's like, here's what I do. You know what I mean? Like, here's the companies, the size of the companies I work with. Here's the industries I work with. And then here's the type of work that we do. And if you're going to take on something that departs from that, you can sometimes destroy what you've built. Yeah. Or maybe you don't even really have the capability of doing the other stuff because it's so divorced from everything else that you're doing. But we talk about your why all the time. So, this is very early stage startup type stuff too, where a company will again, like if you're doing, especially if you do this methodically and you come up with your business idea and we decide we're going to do this, we start doing it, everything's kind of working okay. Now you have this opportunity. Right. And it's not the wrong decision to take on something that diverts from your why all the time, because you could easily say what we're doing isn't working that great. And if we take the company in this direction, we could become this whole different type of company, right? Yeah. Which is part of the reflection part, because we'll be like, what was your why when you started and what is it now? because it can change, right?
Absolutely.
Give you to pivot and whatever, you take on a different opportunity. But I think that a lot of the time it takes you away from what you're doing, and the consequences will be usually is probably the wrong word. They can be negative.
Right.
Right. If you do something that just is solely different industry, different type of work, and it either distracts or it takes away from, or you just don't do as good of a job from it. And I think that you just have to remember it's everything we're going to talk about is consequences and trade-offs. And this is one of the consequences of trade-off. What if we do this? Might fundamentally change our company.
Right.
And is that the right decision?
Right. We're working right now with a restaurant, and one of the things that they made the conscious, and they were ready to go in this realm right when we started working with them. So I take zero credit for this decision, but it's a great example of kind of the refocus of your why, because they were a kind of summertime restaurant destination because of where they were located, right? But for years, they were trying to push and grow their off-season business. Why? Well, because they saw this opportunity there, right? But what are they really, right? So really, they're a place that in the summer when people are down and by the coast and blah blah, they do really well. Their refocus and the remembering of their why, of what they really were, led them to eventually be like, all right, we're just going to close. We're going to close during this time and stop, because their net increased significantly just by saying we're just going to close instead of fighting uphill to be this thing that we're not,
Right.
And companies do this all the time, and they'll get stuck in that
Right.
rabbit hole. But sometimes just a remembering of this is what our company really is. This new opportunity, does it fit? The opportunities we're currently engaged in, do they fit? Did we get into them maybe for a reason that was different than we should? And kind of go from there.
Right.
So
You say this a lot in like entertainment when like companies take on, like I think Disney is a good example, right? Because Disney, you just have this association. Like, what's your association with that brand? Mm-hmm. Kids, family entertainment. And then when they take on something like ABC or ESPN,
yeah.
or when they had that separate division, I think Disney's adult division was Touchstone, right? I think Touchstone Pictures was Disney.
Okay.
So it's like there's like these adult themed movies and stuff like that,
yeah.
right? And so it's like, and it worked. And I think the reason it worked is because they saw this opportunity where it's like, we make high quality entertainment. We have all this talent, and why wouldn't we make these? But the way they did it was by branding it differently. So there's a separation. They didn't tarnish the Disney brand. You can have like a horror movie with like, that began with the you couldn't do that, right? So it's like they figured it out.
Yeah.
And I think that's okay for like a company at any stage to decide to pivot and make a mistake, as long as it's not going to destroy their business, right? So it's like, this is an evaluation. It's okay to say, look, we're going to do this whole other thing, and it could work. And it's okay to then cut your losses and say it didn't work. You're going to sell that part of the business, or just close that part of the business and cut our losses.
Right.
Right. But it's got to be a well thought out decision. It can't just be like a jump in, like, hey, we're just going to do this, right? We're going to say yes to this. It can't just be that.
I love it. I love it. Refocus on your why and think about the cost of the yes. Awesome. Which jumps us into our final blunt force fact number 3, which is excellence over excess. And when we go down,
I feel like there's other ways of saying that.
There's a lot of other ways to say that. I think
quality versus quantity, or something like that.
We kicked around a million ways saying that. And we settled on excellence over excess, because at the end of the day, what too many yeses can lead to, and fear-based yeses, is now you're pumping stuff out, and the quality of it across the board starts to denigrate. Starts to go down, and it's not conscious. You didn't, that wasn't the plan. It's not what you intended to happen, but out of fear and without a true thought process that we just went through with the first two blunt force facts, you end up with a diluted product or a diluted service, and then everyone's getting pennies of what they.
I mean, we're living through that. I like the entertainment stuff. We're living through that with like Marvel right now. Right, we're totally living through it.
Go ahead.
I don't know because I watched. You don't do the Marvel movies?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. Not to the extent maybe that you are. I don't know. I don't know how much you're watching them, but I do like them. I've watched them. But you're saying that they're flooding.
Well, I'm not a Marvel. I'm not a comic book guy, but it was like something easy for me to do with my boy. Right, it was like bright, shiny stuff, and it didn't suck.
Yeah.
Most of the time, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I really dug like the original Iron Man. I never read the Iron Man cartoon, but I was just in, right? And so it's like easy to go. You go, you take your kid or whatever. But you know, they've had a really, really rough year, and there's a lot of reasons for that. But I think a big popular opinion is that there is just been this quality degrading as they've tried to take on more and more of these projects. It's like they're just like, yeah, exactly. They went from like 1 or 2 movies a year to like 4 movies a year, and now you're talking about the creativity being extended. Now, did they have amazing resources? Yes, but like at the end of the day, like that flooding, I think you used the word flood. It just there was other consequences like in like the whole industry. There's only a few really good big firms that work on like the visual effects.
Yeah.
And those companies just got overextended. So the more Marvel movies made, and then these other not just Marvel, other companies wanted to make movies that were based on these really, really high quality and expensive visuals. And, you know, it's like kind of like a joke. It's like it's 2023 and the CGI isn't as good now as it was like 10 years ago. And it's really because of the overextension. It's because these small houses are they're overextended. Right. And it's like the more movies, it's not resulted in better quality. In fact, it's resulted in the complete opposite. And that's just a theory, too, because there could be other reasons. Like, people are just sick of superhero movies, too. I don't think it's just that. But like, I think you can see a quality downgrade because it's like, you know, at the beginning, it was just a few people in a room figuring that shit out. And now it's like this whole big thing. And now, like, nothing's working. Like, you know, now they put it out. It's just like this last one, the Marvels or whatever, which, you know, time dates the video a little bit, but like this is the worst performing one ever, like for 20 years. I mean, it's the worst one they've put out in a long time.
Right.
And it just speaks to everything we said. It's like, you can't just keep doing it. You know what I mean? You have to have some quality control.
Right.
And you just think dollars.
Yeah.
Right. It's just dollars. Yeah. And especially if it's been working. Right? It's like $1 billion movie, $1 billion movie, $1 billion movie. Now it's like, okay, we took a loss here. Now everything is just a loss. You know what I mean? It's like,
Yep.
And can you manage that ahead of time? Can you grow? Because obviously the good companies, they just grow and they never have these huge hiccups. It's really hard to grow without a small hiccup.
Of course.
You know, without a small loss and say, okay, well, that didn't destroy our company. But can you grow and keep that excellence? Right. And what do you do? What's the foundation for the excellence? You know what I mean? And I think a lot of that, if you dig into the Marvel stuff, a lot of it is the foundation was a little shaky all the way from the beginning. They kind of got away with just kind of making it up as they went along. Like Iron Man, I guess they were like writing that movie as they were making it. You know, they'd be like, come out, you know, here's the new freaking scene. And they would just do it right there. I mean,
I did not know this.
And I think that it worked to the extent that movie was awesome and everybody loved it. And it kind of developed what Marvel became, like the humor and like the kind of like the way that it was put together. But at scale, that has really struggled. Yeah. You know, and like that's the same thing with that company. It's like, can we lay that foundation for reach and the excellence that we need? Right. You know, and that's what you have to do. You can't just say yes. Do we have the foundation to take this on? You need to more doesn't equal better. Right?
Focus on excellence. Yeah. And at the end of the day, small businesses aren't Marvel. And one hiccup could close.
Even Marvel.
Right. But could close them.
Disney struggles.
Right. They may have moments of struggle. They have a little bit of the bandwidth to overcome it. Whereas, you know, if you start to focus more on just excess as opposed to excellence without going through the thought pattern that we talked about, I mean, that could be devastating for you, right? To lose a couple really key clients because once they're lost, they're not coming back tomorrow. Right. You know, maybe you get them back, but you're talking years down the road. Yeah. When somebody makes a switch, they make the switch and hands off for a while.
I've definitely done that. I mean, I have a bunch of clients who just over the course of my period who've left, and A lot of times it was customer service because I was overextended, right?
Yeah.
But what you don't want to have, and I don't really have this, which is you don't want to have that negative piece out there.
Right.
The negative customer service piece isn't good.
Right.
Like you really don't want to have bad work out there. And people can be like, "Oh, I saw that work. It's terrible."
And you can
like
get
they
there.
did bad work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like because then you're jumping at the next thing, and it's like, okay, I'm gonna take this client because it's more money and it's a better project, and I'm gonna do a crappy job over here, right? And you lose that client or whatever it is, but that might haunt you, that bad work.
Absolutely.
Even if you think that, just this, you think that taking on the better thing, it's like, oh, I'll do a good job here and that will it might not. You don't want to have that negative shit hanging out there just because you took on too much.
So the takeaway to our listeners today, learn how to just say no and get that word in your vocabulary. For the benefits of blunt force fact number 1, there's no such thing as a free yes. There's a cost to every yes that you have.
Yeah, just be prepared. Prepare yourself. Don't just think I'm just going to get the money, right? Going to get that money.
Blunt force fact number 2, remember your why. When you say yes to something, make sure it aligns with your vision. And blunt force fact number 3, always focus on excellence over excess, because otherwise you'll end up like Marvel and
Just
have shitty movies for a year straight.
Just think that shit through, right?
That's it.
Just don't say yes. Think it through. Then maybe you can say yes. You can still say yes. But did you have a process? Was it thought through? Did you do your pros and cons sheet? Pros, negatives, right? Did you write that down?
Don't operate out of fear.
Exactly.
I'm Brian LaFauci.
Patrick Marino.
Until next time.
Thank you.